For the last month, I have been using the Google Pixel 2 XL as my primary phone instead of my iPhone, and it replaced the phone line that my Galaxy Z Fold 5 was on. Now, if you don't know why I did this, during my subathon, I set one of the later donation goals to be, I'll buy the oldest phone I can that still gets security updates and use it for a month and see how it goes. See whether you can use, and see whether you could use an about 6-year-old phone in 2024 and how that goes. Now, the security updates for this phone did end in December, I believe, was the last one it got. So it is, by all definitions, no longer truly safe to use, but it was safe enough for me to use for this 1-month challenge and then get rid of and never touch again. Probably not get rid of, but put on a shelf and say, ooh, pretty, because if nothing else, this phone is very pretty. It is a throwback to a very different time. The bezels, top and bottom, are huge. Like, it's almost at the same level as, like, maybe an iPhone 7. Maybe slightly smaller, but not by much. Now, the screen itself is, it gets very bright. It is very colorful. The OLED's great. The entire phone, due to its age, is very laggy. You can't really tell, but it's no longer smooth operation. Everything, you can feel it, like, chunk in and out, like the processor can't handle it anymore. So this is updated to Android 11, which is 3 generations old at this point. But even that feels too heavy for what this phone is capable of. Now, you are still able to download basically every app and use it, but every single app feels slower and less responsive than anything before. Constantly, while being on Twitter, I will try to respond to tweets. Yeah, the loading times are incredible, but I will try to respond to tweets, and the text doesn't keep up with how fast you're typing. You'll be sitting there trying to type out a response, look down, and nothing's typed yet, and then it'll all rush in at once. It is very odd. It is an experience that I don't really understand. And while most apps like TikTok work, a lot of the features don't work right because the phone can't actually process what it's trying to do. And speaking of TikToks, I don't know if you've seen any of the TikToks I've uploaded in the last month, which isn't a lot, mostly because of this phone. The camera quality is actually insanely good still. The Google Pixel has always had an incredible camera. It's always been better for still photos than for videos. But with this phone in particular, and maybe it's because of how old it is, it's choppy. It's like it's lagging because it can't even process the video it is taking. So all of the TikToks for this month just look like I'm stop motion instead of being a regular dude. And speaking of all of that, the speakers when trying to watch content are just atrocious. I would play something, but I don't think it'll matter. Here's the speakers with content recorded on the Pixel.
A good chunk of money selling their sauces in Walmart and other retail stores.
That's the speaker situation for all the content I've been watching for the last month. Now, there are still some good things about the phone. Like I said, the screen is still very nice. It is weird, the back being plastic here, glass here. It makes the phone feel kind of light and cheap. One thing I do miss is the fingerprint sensor, at least this placement of it. And I miss it using this as the primary over the iPhone. I would love to have, like, the Apple logo be a fingerprint sensor, or the power button so it would scan my thumb the way I get into my Z Fold 5. I like Face ID, but it is nice to be able to put the phone face down, and when I pick it up, it's unlocked before I'm looking at it. That is a thing that can bug me sometimes about the iPhone, so I do like that. Aside from that, the camera for taking pictures is still absolutely incredible. Yeah, now maybe it's not as good as a current Pixel or an iPhone 15, But when you're talking about a 6-year difference in phones, it's really not that bad. And I think a lot of the things I have problems with in this device are things that maybe other people wouldn't. You know, it feeling a little laggy maybe doesn't bug as many people as it does me. The text thing, I can't get over. The, like, scrolling Twitter and you can't, like, scroll at the same pace because it, like, chops in and out. That's tough. I think this really does show that, like, upgrading phones is important. You need to be like me and do it every year. God, no. But I also think waiting until a phone is completely end of life doesn't work either. This is an end of life phone, and it is, while it's usable, it is not good. I wouldn't even argue that it's fine. It's bad. It's a bad experience to use, which is very sad because this is one of the greatest phones of all time. The Pixel 2 was an incredible device in its day. And I think the Pixel 2, more than the original Pixel, is the reason the Pixel is still thriving today. Google gives up on devices very quickly. But I think the reception of the Pixel 2 and how good it was and how, not at the same price point, but how it could compete with a lot of things the iPhone did at the time was incredible. And that's still what Google does now, as well as Samsung, obviously. But a true stock Android experience is incredible. And I think that is an important thing for me to touch on as a guy who, for the last 8 years, has been primarily an iPhone user. And for the last 4 or 5 months, got an Android again, but it's using Samsung's skin of Android. It is not just Android. This is just pure, unadulterated Android. And that experience is actually really nice. There's not as much bloatware as there is on Samsung. There's not all this extra junk on your phone that you don't need, except for whatever reason, Google allowing games to be on your phone when you buy them. That's ridiculous. I know, all Android phones do that. Very weird, not a big fan. But the design language of this phone, the actual usability for when it came out, the front-facing speakers, the ginormous screen, the like Oreo colorway, all the way down to the orange power button. It all just combines together to make a very beautiful phone that is nice to hold in the hand and nice to use when it worked. But I couldn't recommend you keep using this phone. If you still have a Pixel 2, move on. It's dead. It's over. But I think this does show phones can last longer than you'd think. I'm the type of person who thinks 3 years is probably too long, and maybe not. Now, I do think 6 or 7, you're pushing it. And that's mostly because you're no longer getting new features and staying up to date with operating systems, and that's tough. But Android 11 on this phone doesn't work well. And I couldn't go back and test if it would have worked better on an older version of Android, because it's not safe to do so. There aren't security updates anymore. That's really what it comes down to. If you have that old of a phone, it's not worth using. And I can't lie, I have been so ready to go back to my Galaxy Fold. So ready. This has not been a fun experience. It is not fun to use this phone. It's just not. Which is very sad, because this is one of the phones I wanted most in my life, and I was really hoping this would be a fun experience. And I could see how good this phone actually was in its day. But I also see that it's not its day anymore. And that is very sad. Some things I do like, call screening on the Pixel is incredible. I like never having to answer the phone when people call me, because I just let the phone like answer for me. It's pretty great. But I'm very ready to get back to my Z Fold. And I don't love that experience. I think, there's definitely a middle ground for how often you should get new phones. I would say 3 to 4 years is probably the max of what you should do. But obviously you can go the full 6, and it does work. It's just not a good experience. but it does function. And with that, I think that's really all I got. So let me know in the comments below if you used a Google Pixel 2, what you thought of it. Let me know what phone you're using now and how long you've had it, how long you normally keep phones. I think all of that is very interesting. Make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe, all that fun junk. We're putting out 2 videos a week here on this channel. Appreciate you a ton. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.